Thank you for your time and attention. I'll be happy to take any questions you might have until they kick me out. I guess actually we have to get out of here in another 20 minutes or so, and you wanted to do some general Q&A, so.
Noni. Yes, I have an announcement to make. The thing is that with all the delays we've had today, we're unfortunately going to have to move the Q&A session to some other location because this building has to be completely empty from anyone by 6 o'clock, and that's in 20 minutes from now.
So should we take about maybe a few questions here?
Yeah,
and then
well, you can basically take a few questions, and
Okay.
at basically 10 to 6, we're going to just...
And I am, by the way, going to be here for the whole week. I will leave on Sunday and go directly to Ottawa for the Colonel Summit. Hopefully I'll be awake for that. But I will be around all week to take questions there, but I'll be happy to take a few here. Andreas.
For one slide you had company may fund unpleasant parts of a project. Would you call security support an unpleasant part, and would you think that a company could fund it?
There's actually been a lot of discussion independent of HP's participation about how you do security and is it possible to fund part of it without screwing it up totally. Yes, it is an example of something where I think we actually have in indirect ways spent money improving security, and I wouldn't mind being approached about doing something in a more direct way. But you know, there's this general problem which I identified early in my talk, that when you get in a situation where some people doing a thing for a project are being paid for it and some aren't, you have to work that very carefully so that the people not being paid don't somehow get demoralized or unmotivated, or you can end up in a situation that was worse than when you started, where nobody wants to do anything on it unless they're being paid, and then it's a job and not an adventure, and the whole thing gets weird. So.
I myself have a question, since you were mentioning earlier, upstairs.
Yeah, okay.
You were mentioning earlier the kind of work that HP does with the open source community, and I was just curious if, since I'm local here, what kind of open source and free software activities HP does in Finland? Are you?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I think that some folks from HP in Finland will be in and out through the week, and maybe I can pester one of them to help us understand that.
I would be quite curious,
I don't know.
yes. Okay, well,
Sorry.
during the week then. Thanks.
Yeah, up here?
What is your view with your HP hat on of the Vancouver proposal, or to ask it differently, how
I'm sorry.
would...
Oh, the Vancouver proposal, yeah.
Yeah. Or to ask it differently, how important is it to have the Linux community keep supporting systems that have been declared end of life by a hardware vendor?
Yeah, so the interesting thing that we have learned in HP as a result of the interesting sequence of mergers and acquisitions that's led us to the HP that we have today. Yeah, Alpha, PA risk, MIPS-based things. HP has this amazing array of stuff that we're still supporting for customers in one way or another. And we learned in the process of working out the roadmaps for what would survive past the compact merger, that sometimes you do have to just say, we're done with this, we can't do this anymore, there's no business motivation and so forth. And I believe that it's completely reasonable to expect that at some point the Debian project will look at one or more of the architectures we currently support and go, you know, this just doesn't make sense anymore. Now, when we talk about the Vancouver proposal in specific, I'm actually horribly disappointed that I wasn't able to be in Vancouver, because I'm one of the folks that was invited who didn't get there. But I had been traveling insanely just before and needed to travel insanely just after that, and it was one of the few weekends in my schedule that I got to spend at home with my kids. So I decided to stay home with the kids, and I guess I still think that was the right decision. But boy, it sounds like it would have been fun to, to be a fly on the wall in some of those discussions. Whether the specific set of proposals that came about as a result of the Vancouver meeting are the right ones and what we ought to do for the future, you know, there's still some white space around that. In particular, I've had some interesting conversations with people who were there about just how important is it for things like, you know, IA64 to be, you know, first tier, second tier in our support structure in Debian and things like that. And so there's been a lot of discussion. I don't know what the right answer is, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect that Debian will remain committed to supporting every possible architecture forever. It's one of the reasons I haven't proposed the VAX port yet. But actually, the funny story about that, the day the compact merger was publicly announced as being successfully completed, they were past the lawsuits and all that, and it was going to happen. I happened to be with some friends at the Dayton Amateur Radio Convention, which is a big amateur radio thing in the U.S. every year with a huge flea market full of electronic stuff. And I managed that day to acquire, for really cheap, an old VAX station. And so I put a note out on one of our internal mailing lists announcing that I had just acquired a cheap VAX since my old VAXs were all gone. And with this, I would begin work immediately on the Debian VAX port. And the message I got back from my boss, which was pretty funny at the time and I still get a chuckle over, was, boy, that sure makes the PA RISC port look a whole lot more relevant now, doesn't it? So, yeah, I fully expect that we'll turn some architectures off over time. I think what's even more likely is we'll get into a mode where we don't make them completely go away, but they drop out of the main mirror network and they don't try to be included in stable releases. I think there's also an interesting question that can be asked for architectures like ARM, where the primary use of them is in embedded sorts of things, about what do the people doing the derivatives of Debian for those embedded devices really need from Debian? Is it important to them to have all of the features of a stable release, or is that noise? And I don't know the answer. But I think there's a lot of discussions we could have that would lead us to be able to get away with doing less work, and that would be a good thing. Other questions?
I have the mic.
Where are you?
Up here.
Ah, hello. With a Guadex shirt. Gotta love it.
My name is Yuha. And I don't know, you would perhaps like a Debian question, but I don't know how much this is about Debian, and I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but many businesses want to benefit from the open development process, and like HP, Novell, many businesses, let's not call names, but you almost touch the forking thing, like if a desktop project like GNOME is producing software and a business wants to have a feature for the customers or something, and in effect, if it doesn't get into the main project, and then it's going to be a commercial fork. So, well, I don't have to say anymore,
So there's a trade-off in all of these things. And one of the questions that our open source review board always asks when a project comes along inside the company and says, we want to do this with some open source project, is they ask, how's that going to be supported? What's the support life of this thing you want to do going to be? Are you committed to providing support for that over the long term, or have you not thought about all of the consequences of your actions? And so we try to make sure that people in our company that are engaging in those sorts of actions where they might be doing something that solves a short-term problem, but not doing it in a way that's clearly, obviously going to be accepted by the community in the long term, we try to make sure they understand what the obligations and the sort of implied commitments are. I mean, to some extent, there's no absolute commitment beyond the normal sort of indemnification clauses and so forth that customers expect from a company like HP for the products that we sell them. But there's certainly an implied degree of support if we ship something to a customer, even if it's open source and we give them all the source code and adhere to all the terms of the licenses. If 6 months or a year later we go, oops, sorry, we don't care about that anymore, they won't be happy with us as a supplier. And so we try to think through all of those things. There's definitely a cost associated with maintaining anything that isn't fully accepted by whoever the appropriate upstream is, but sometimes that cost is completely justified if the business opportunity you're chasing is big enough. So there's no one answer that fits everything. I would like to point out that Debian is only one of the projects that we provide substantial hardware and bandwidth and other resources to. The GNOME Foundation main servers are running on HP Iron now. We recently donated a couple of quad dual-core Opteron servers with great gobs of memory and 10 terabytes or something of disk apiece to the kernel.org guys. freedesktop.org, x.org, the FSF. Awful lot of projects we all know and care about are running on Iron that we threw their way. So it's not just a Debian thing. This is really our relationship with Debian is an important part of a larger set of relationships that we're trying to foster. With that, obviously we're about out of time. I'll stop taking questions here. I'll be happy to take others during the rest of the week while we're at the conference. Thanks.
Thank you, Bdale.